All right, we get to start this again. We get another video. So a couple things that I want to talk about is their Google groups. I'm getting a lot more people in the groups. I still have about 10 sophomores that are not in the group or have not, and they haven't really even, the ones that aren't in there have not contacted me at all. If you can, remind your classmates that this is not like an optional thing. I mean, we have to, we're missing school, but we have to still do academic work. So this isn't just like a vacation, right? This is something that we still need to do. Just because we're going through this kind of crazy time period doesn't mean anything. We still have to do the stuff. How this could really hurt you is if you're in a group or with your partner for your Revolution project. If they're not going to participate, that could be really an issue for you. So I'm going to, at the end of this little lecture, I'll talk about the project and, talk about the time you guys are going to get for that. I'm sure you're busy with everything else going on and trying to get everything figured out, which is fine. I mean, if you feel like there's just too much going on and you're going to be honest with me, email me, tell me just that you need more time or whatever else. That's fine. Because I'm sure you're getting work from every other teacher, and it's probably just a madhouse right now. So communicate with me, and I will be much more willing to work with you if you communicate with me, okay? So we're going to start off we talked about what the estate system was, right? It was this social system, and I'm glad you guys are putting in stuff in the group discussions that are pretty beneficial to each other. I mean, you're talking about, I've seen some good discussions back and forth. So it's a social system in France, basically for kind of the history of France. When you're looking at prior to this revolution, it's the big thing that's kind of leading to this point. All right. And on the picture on the screen here, if you look at the guy who's dressed in this, he's got basically I don't even know what you'd call that, a big, it's almost like a robe, right? Or like a bathrobe type thing. And then that's King Louis, okay? In the middle is his wife, Marie Antoinette, the Queen. And on the right, to show the kind of wealth that they had, and this difference between the people of France and these two individuals, that necklace was valued at $3.7 million. So it just kind of gives you this, idea that they were very, very wealthy, and the people of France, when you look at the estate system and the tax system they had, was super unfair for them. Okay, so that's just something to remember, and that's kind of a big indicator. The jewelry that she even wore that showed that, they were taking advantage of these people. Okay, so we're going to look at, basically today we'll look at Versailles, okay, which is where the royal palace was at. This is the royal palace. If you were a peasant and you see this kind of thing going on, where your king and queen were living and these royalty were living at, you'd probably be a little bit disgruntled, I would say. Okay. There's a video in a couple slides that I'm not going to show on here, but you'll need to watch that to kind of show the history of Versailles. It kind of starts out as this, they call it a small hunting cabin, like a lodge, but it's really not that small. Probably for a king's hunting cabin or lodge, it would be fairly small maybe, but for anybody else's, it seems like a pretty nice little place. And it evolves pretty significantly over time. So Versailles is kind of this almost epitome of the inequality, right? I mean, you see, I'll show you the next picture. I'll show you this is one of the hallways in the royal palace. So you have these statues here that are holding up the chandeliers along the sides there that, it's just all this is gold. I mean, if you look at the paintings on the ceiling, this is just an incredible piece of work. I mean, the building is insane. And, you know, I assume that the juniors will not be going to Europe, but I hope they're able to get to take a tour of Versailles if they do, because, and the people that might go up, you know, with Mr. Higdon in the future, this is an incredibly, you know, impressive building. So again, you know, you just look at this and you're like, okay, this is kind of insane to think that with all these poor people in the country, there are people that are still living pretty high on the hog, right? It's kind of crazy. So here's the video I want you to watch. It basically just goes through and shows this palace. I will post this on Classroom also, so you guys can just pull it up, watch it. I think it might be, I want to say 15 minutes, maybe. I don't even know if it's that long. Okay, so I'll put it on Classroom so you guys can see it and you can get on there and stuff, so that's not an issue. So Louis. Now this is Louis the 15th, okay? Now Louis the 15th was kind of part of the reason why the French people wanted to kind of push against the government, all right? And so we're starting to look at this kind of, he comes into play, he's the king when they have their height of the French power in the 18th century, okay? So France is a very powerful nation. You know, we see France as a powerful nation throughout history, but especially at this time period, their culture is a big thing. You know, French culture has always kind of been a big thing in the world view. But his decisions that kind of led to issues with weakening France and the people kind of being frustrated. So damaging the power of France was something that, you know, you think about all these nations that had overseas territories, right? You know, if you could sustain that, that's fine. But a lot of times it weakened you because financially you had to send people, you had to use your resources. And this is something that happens in France numerous times. You know, part of the reason why the United States got into the Vietnam War in the 1960s, well, 50s really, is because it was a French colony, and the French basically said, "Hey, we're leaving. You guys want to kind of take our role in this country?" And the U.S. took that advantage, and they went after it. But so the French have kind of had this, but you know, these overseas territories do cost a lot of money, right? And you know, weakening the treasury, weakening their financial power, is a pretty significant thing, especially when you have a lot of poor people, and now you have the government is becoming a little more poor. So if you have a poorer government, and your government is forcing the little guy, which is 98% of the population, to pay more taxes, but they're not getting any more wealth out of it, that's kind of the issue here, right? So he discredited the absolute monarchy. So the absolute monarchy is, remember we talked about absolute power, and really these Louis are kind of, they're not the absolute ruler like you think of Henry VIII, or, you know, in the past, you know, like William the Conqueror we talked a little bit about, or even in the future when you start looking at Napoleon coming into France after the Revolution, right? So this absolute power is kind of weakened by these last couple rulers of the monarchy in France. And they made it easier to distrust a government. So if you can feel like you can trust your government, you will definitely not do things to push against it as much, right? Because if you feel like they're trustworthy, you know, you can do what they're going to say a little bit more easily. But if you cannot trust them, then every decision they make is the issue right there. I mean, you don't know what's going on, right? So, and they talk about, you know, he's kind of part of the reason why the French Revolution started, but it didn't start till after him. And that's where you see, you know, even in the United States, you see presidents that say economically, okay, So somebody has a great economy in their early presidency. All right. A lot of times they attribute that to the president prior, or vice versa, right? So Herbert Hoover gets blamed for the Great Depression. Well, it really wasn't his fault. He was something he was coming into, right? And he might not have done everything he could to change or help that, like what FDR did to kind of get us out of that depression. But these things aren't always the person's fault that's in power at the time. So for our next one is Louis XVI, okay? And he is, he's kind of who is attributed to, to having, he's the last, basically, well, last king here before the revolution, okay? And he marries Marie Antoinette, all right? And she was 14 years old, and he's 15, so they're both very young, okay? And like we talked about, you see a lot of young kings and queens because either their dad dies when they're young and they have to take that, they're the next heir to the throne, and that's just how, the idea of divine right goes. That's just what it is. I mean, that's history. So he's 19 when he becomes king, and it's right before the American Revolution kind of is, or the Americans get their independence. And, this is really a big part of, these two are so connected because the American Revolution and the French Revolution happen in sequence, and they're both supportive of each other because it's, they both are kind of anti-British. And that's what the Americans were going against, was this British rule. So the French supported them, and then vice versa. When the French were wanting help on their revolution, I mean, the Americans did what they could. Writing of a constitution was a big one. Okay, and then you'll see places around the country in the United States where, like Louisville, Kentucky is named after him. All right, when you look at a lot of places like, places in Virginia especially, okay? Jamestown is one, right? That's Jamestown is after King James. So wherever they have these either colonies or, things like that, they have names of people that, generally a king, because that's kind of an important factor in the country, right? So, that's a big part of it all. Okay, we'll do one more slide because I want you guys to be able to watch the video and then also start on your project, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So Louis's accomplishments, and this is Louis XVI. So he promoted some civil rights and religious freedoms, which is kind of unheard of for a monarch that has pretty much absolute power in Europe, and that's a big deal, okay? He supported the American Revolution, which for us, that's a huge deal. Otherwise we wouldn't have that. We wouldn't have the support, and we wouldn't have probably been as successful in our venture. So he also worked toward the abolition of serfdom, which was a form of slavery. So he's trying to free people in his own country. And this is where I think I talked to you guys about, he was really trying to be helpful to the people. I think he saw himself as, trying to be a good guy for these poor people in this, group of the majority of France. But it was just too little too late. His dad was the reason why these things happened, and you couldn't come back from what had already kind of been boiling over, right? And that's kind of what happens, and he's the victim of all this, and he also encouraged exploration. So again, they're going out, they're trying to find these colonies, they're trying to build an empire. The British have been doing it, the Spanish, the Portuguese, all these people have been doing this, building empires, and the French really want to compete with the rest of the world powers. So that's something that he really tried to do too. And for him and the royals of France and the wealthy people, that's great. They have these empires, but what does it do for the poor people of France? It doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't make them money. It doesn't help them pay their bills or pay the taxes or anything. Okay, so that's where I think a lot of people see it as not beneficial to the country as a whole. And that's kind of where we see issues with France also. Okay, so what I want you to do, and this is first hour, but I want you to go into the Revolution Project, and you all have your partner. If you don't know your partner, email me. Or if you know your partner, just straight up email them. Okay? I'd like you guys to be in pretty good communication with your partners. So I think it's important, especially now when we're not going to be in school for a while. Okay? So this is no different than stuff we're doing in class, right? We need to be able to put a little bit of time in. I'm not asking you to put 2-3 hours a day in on this class. Don't do that, please, because you have a lot going on. All right? But I would like you to link your PowerPoint to the classroom so I can kind of see your progress, and I can see who's doing work. All right. So if Chase has partnered with Cage, I don't know whose partners here, but if Cage isn't doing any work and Chase is doing all the work, I can tell, okay, well, maybe Chase is not, or Cage is not putting in the effort right now, and I need to email him and communicate that a little bit, okay? So I just need to see what you guys are doing, and this helps me a little bit kind of visualize what's going on, okay? And now, so here's the rubric, and I'll put this on Classroom because I'm not going to just explain it all here. You guys can read this. But basically, there's these 5 categories we want to look at. Background information, geographic information, types of government, because remember we talk about revolution being this change of government or change of social structure from one to another, right? One system to another. So what I want to see is, what type of system do they have and what are they going to, right? Those are the 2 big things. Then causes and effects of the revolution, because we talked about, hey, there's these causes. Something causes this revolution. Now, after the revolution, what happens after that? Like, what is going on after that? Okay. And then some leaders, because there are always going to be leaders of this revolution. Like, we have our founding fathers. They were leaders of a revolution. I mean, they really were, right? And when you start looking at France, you talk about Robespierre. Maximilien Robespierre was a big leader of the revolution. All right. So who were some leaders of your revolution that you picked? Again, if you guys need information on, like, if you need to remember what your revolution was and who your partner was, shoot me an email. I should have that all written down. But yeah, we'll stop there pretty much. Again, email me if you have questions. People have been awesome about letting me know if there's issues or if they have questions about anything. But yeah, we're going on, what's this, day 3 now of kind of our however many weeks we're doing, whatever time, whatever it is, right? We're on day 3. So try to do some things at home that you can do that are kind of keeping your sanity, because I know it's tough sometimes. But yeah, try to do your work, try to get things done, and then do some stuff for yourself, okay? So have a good day, and I will hopefully see some work done. All right.